Now,
I find myself explaining what an Armenian is and where Armenia is, the country, and I also spend and explain to many people the genocide. The genocide, as some of you may hear, is commemorated on April the 24th of every year. And in Los Angeles, thousands of young Armenian people of Armenian background gather to protest what the Turks did. And throughout the years from 1896 to 1922, at least a dozen minor genocides, and the major genocide was in 1915. You saw the picture of my mother and father. They were both survivors. My mother came to this country at age 14 with the purpose of getting married. And by 15, she was married, and my older brother was born. And by 18, I was born. I also not only saw many Armenians who were survivors of the genocide in the United States, but I have actually seen, talked, and experienced with Armenians in Palestine, where there used to be at least thousands of Armenians who had survived. I met Armenian survivors in Egypt, Cairo, Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt. I met survivors in Athens, Greece. I met survivors, one of them I could not find, and that was my uncle who survived and passed away in Belgium. But I was able to see my father's brother in Marseille, France. My grandmother, his mother, passed away during World War II, but I actually have seen my uncle in Marseille. I have actually seen my aunt, my mother's sister, in Athens, Greece. I have actually visited the grave sites of my grandmother and uncles and some of my cousins in Jerusalem, Palestine. So the story is true. Later on in life, as I grew older, my whole feeling about what we say when we say genocide changed. Before, it was just a many-lettered word, Genocide. But as I read books and visited these places, and I was able to read the multitude of ways that the Turks inhumanely murdered up to 1.5 million Armenians. So I now carry it very deeply in my heart. And therefore, that's one reason why I got into the field of sponsoring students, because I myself was a teacher of mathematics in Los Angeles for 38 years. I also was a teacher of mathematics, advanced mathematics, in a community college for 57 years. That's perhaps why my direction was towards education. I also want to say something about my brother, who passed away a little bit more than a year ago. John, my brother, was sent home from kindergarten located where we lived in Worcester, Massachusetts. And my brother had a note pinned to his sweater, and in English the letter said, "When your son knows how to speak English, send him back to kindergarten." That same little boy who could not speak English at age 5 went into the Navy in 1942. In a year and a half, he advanced from the lowest rank enlisted, which is a seaman third, to a chief petty officer, which is the highest rank in the enlisted in the Navy. And my brother John not only attained the rank of chief petty officer, but he attained the rank of master chief officer. And one day I inquired about what percentage of naval personnel achieved the rank of master chief petty officer, and I was told that 1% could advance to that level. And one last thing, when you look at my brother's uniform, where there are red insignias, my brother's ranks were not red, they were gold. The point I'm trying to get at is really that both my brother and I, when you really think about it, we were both children of immigrants who had survived somehow the genocide. And yet, I give credit to my brother unquestionably, and also to myself, because both of us served our country generously, not expecting anything except our duty to protect our nation from lunatics like Hitler, Mussolini, and Tojo. And I thank God that to this day He gives me the energy and the health that somehow I can even contribute a little bit to sponsor young men and women who without my help would have always been in a state of poverty. But somehow the opportunity was given them to get an education. And the value of education is that it makes that person hopefully a better person. And by continuing this and getting better people in this world, hopefully the earth will be inhabited by better people. Thank you for listening to my talk. I hope you understood a little bit about the Armenians, their background, their country, and what Armenia contributed to the United States, like my brother and I. Of course, I can't forget my father and mother contributed, but we all contributed. Thank you. I don't like the back part. I feel an obligation to give credit to people like my dad, my uncle, and other men. And I can also give credit to the women of the years past. My father worked at a place called a sweatshop, which was typical of where a lot of the immigrants who came from that part of the world to Worcester, Massachusetts, or Massachusetts in general, they were called sweatshops. If you rubbed your fingernail on the wooden desks or posters, you would be scraping a black mass. The air was full of chemicals. And I remember as a boy when I walked into that factory where my dad worked, there were 5 or 6 men sitting on a bench, and there was a grinder in front of them. And there was a container to the right where the parts were, and they would lean over and get a part and put it up to the grinder. And then they would put that part in this box. They did that 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And they didn't have all the benefits that people have nowadays, like a coffee break, and my dad says that when he went to the bathroom, the manager or the supervisor would come and check that he didn't stay there too long. Those were the days of my father. And not only that, my father, all the years, there was no such thing as going to work in an automobile. You walked. And if you know the weather of Massachusetts, whether it's windy, hail, snow, rain, you name it, they would walk to work and they would come home. I never heard my father ever complaining. And as I got older and older and I realized these things, I said, gee, what a wonderful father I had. My mother would say, I need cream cheese. And my father would walk about 2 miles to a certain district where they had the best cream cheese. Never complained. On the other hand, I give credit to my mother. I have things in my house that are the result of her efforts, crocheting and mending. I remember my mother would take a pair of pants and either lengthen the cuffs because we were getting taller, or else if the pants was not long enough, she would cut the cuffs and mend them. She would take a collar from a shirt and take the threads out and turn the collar of the shirt backwards because the torn part could not be seen because it was folded. I remember my mother getting on her hands and knees and scrubbing the floor and then putting something on the floor so that it would shine. I remember my mother sitting there making sarma, and sarma is a food that some of you know looks like a finger, the shape, and it's wrapped with grape leaves, and there's a little bit of meat there, and there are grains there, and a little bit of garlic and parsley, and I don't know what else. But it would take an hour and a half to prepare the meal. And I remember my mother being at the scrub board in the kitchen, and we had 2 scrub boards. And in one scrub board, she would scrub the clothes on this thing that had like a corrugated metal. And on the other one, she would rinse it. And I remember my mother going out to the porch and hanging the clothes. And in wintertime, it would be clothes. And when the clothes were dried, they were like cardboard, and my mother's fingers and hands would be chapped. My mother never complained. Never complained. I'm trying to illustrate the type of people mothers were and fathers were. They never ever burdened me with the experiences that their people had during the genocide. Never talked about it. In other words, my mother and father gave me a foundation, and my brother also, that we were able to grow and be productive people. And it's the productive type of, and this production is a type that built up the United States of America to what it was and what hopefully it retains to be. That's my message. Thank you.